The PS5 Pro. It's in people's hands. People are reviewing it. Later on the stream, separate stream with the poofy hair, we're going to be talking with Joe Raptor because he has his already. He did like an unboxing. He's talked about it, blah, blah, blah. Like, we'll see what he thinks of it because I'm sure he's tested it in, what do you think? Probably Horizon would be my guess. That's my guess, at least. But we'll talk to him about it. But in the meantime, IGN put up a PS5 Pro review. And I don't want to be like super dismissive or anything. They do have thermal testing, it looks like. They're going to do side-by-sides. They're going to do a lot of stuff. So I am excited to see what they say. And they have it at 4K 60, which is already a huge step up compared to CNET, where CNET was given the official contract by Sony for promoting the PS5 Pro, and they uploaded all of their videos at 1080p 30. How that happened, I don't know. It's like that should be bullet point number 1. This machine is being sold on the premise of being putting games out at 4K 60. Please provide all coverage in at least that quality. You would think that would be a standard, but it wasn't. But nonetheless, IGN is here. They are here to talk about it. Let's see what they say. My phone on mute.
The PlayStation 5 Pro seems like it should be more exciting than it actually is. It's without question the most powerful console you can buy right now, and the enhanced games I've been able to play ahead of launch do look great and run much more smoothly than the standard PS5 can handle thanks to some upgraded hardware and impressive upscaling tech. But it's also completely unsurprising that the faster PS5 is, well, faster, and it's also more expensive. Considering that the original PS5 can still provide enough power to run games competently in 2024, spending $700 means you have to really want the best of the best from your games to make the Pro a worthy investment.
Yeah, I've said for a long time, I think that Sony's done a good job positioning themselves as like the Apple of the gaming space, where it's just presumed like it's almost like a social status thing. You see a lot of YouTubers, for whatever reason, that put their PS5 boxes like in their background so you can see that they have a PS5. It's calmed down since they became more available, but certainly around launch, around like 2020, 2021, that was very, very common. It's very, very strange, but the reason I bring that up is because I think there is a market for people to just buy the really expensive PlayStation for the sake of having the latest PlayStation thing. Like, I do think there's a market for this. Is it huge? I don't know, but I do think it's like sizable. It's not insignificant. So, this hasn't gone like total gangbusters. It hasn't sold out as far as I'm aware. The 30th anniversary edition did, but that was a very limited supply. But that could also be that they just have way more supply of the PS5 Pro. It could be this, could be that, who knows. One thing that has been brought up that they might not bring up here, the PS5 Pro does not have a disk drive in it in the box, and it also does not have a vertical stand. If you want to buy the vertical stand, it's $30, which is insane. And if you want to buy the disk drive, it's another like $70, $80. Apparently, across the globe, people cannot get the disk drives. They've been sold out for months. And what it seems is happening is Sony, they make more money on the digital sales than they do on the physical sales. So they really want you to buy your games digitally. They don't want you to get the disc drive. Not to mention just in terms of like how the ecosystem works. Once you buy all your stuff digitally, you're locked into their ecosystem. It's much harder to justify swapping to PC or something if you can't just sell all of your PS5 games that you have in disc form, to get money to go buy games on Steam or Xbox, whatever. So it's sort of an anti-competitive thing, but also because they're limiting the inventory of the disk drive so much, it seems to me like they are trying to get people to buy this thing or buy other PlayStations. And then because the disk drives are so limited in availability, like a lot of people are just going to say, screw it. I want to use it now. I'm going to buy God of War Ragnarok digital. I'm going to buy Spider-Man 2 digital, because I want to test the game. I'm going to buy Helldivers digital again, just because if they're waiting for a disc version, they may never get it. Certainly I don't think Helldivers 2 even has a physical edition. Maybe it does. But I think that there's a little something shady going on with the whole disc drive situation. They have to offer it because there's a bunch of anti-competition stuff in the EU where they could face lawsuits and stuff and regulatory fines if they don't have an open market for that type of thing. So they kind of have to offer it, which is why like they haven't gone totally digital only, but it certainly seems like they're trying to push people. They're trying to push people towards just saying screw it and buying everything digital. I buy a lot of stuff digital. For me, it's just more convenient, frankly, but I think it's important for people to have the choice, for people to have the option to do this kind of backhanded, sneaky way of forcing people into that situation to have to buy stuff digitally. To me, it just feels really slimy.
Accounts.
Is anyone else also kind of bummed that it doesn't look that different? Like they just ribbed it for your pleasure and that's it. Like I was kind of hoping it would look a lot more different, frankly. Like I don't know. But it's a small point. It's a small point. But when I buy new tech, I personally like it when it looks a little bit different. Like iPhones looking the exact same 5 years at a time. It's kind of unexciting, underwhelming. Like give me something huge, surprise me, wow me.
For its price, you'll be disappointed to find that the PS5 Pro does not come with every possible bell and whistle. It does pack in a standard DualSense, but there's no vertical stand included, and if you're the type who has a library of physical games, be ready to shell out an extra $80 for a Blu-ray disc drive to install yourself. If you feel like Sony is trying to nickel and dime you on top of the $700 price tag, I'm not going to argue against you. Physically, it's a pretty sleek console relative to the enormous launch PS5, and it largely takes after the design principles of the slim model. The only major difference is that it's taller when standing vertical, which is accounted for by the fins in the middle that create a cross-section on the console.
It also makes it so the plates, if you bought replacement plates, they don't work. So if you want to customize this one, you got to buy the plates again. You got to buy different plates. It's very sneaky.
It helps make room for the more robust internal components, but doesn't add much bulk to the existing design. It's also not noticeably louder than the original PS5, so you don't need to worry about it sounding like a jet engine when your games get intense. As far as thermals go, the PS5 Pro runs roughly the same temperature as the base PS5 under load, hovering around 35 to 40 degrees Celsius from the rear exhaust, based on our thermal imaging tests. It's a bit striking how little has changed from the original PS5 on the spec sheet. The Pro comes with a 2TB NVMe SSD, which is twice as large but the same speed as the original super fast storage drive. That addresses one of the main complaints about the launch PS5, which is that 1TB goes very quickly when you're installing games that take upwards of 100 GB at a time.
I forgot this too, and like, isn't it only 825 gigs? It was something weird. In my brain, I was like, oh, it's a terabyte, but the system software takes it down to like 900, whatever. But I'm pretty sure it was only like 800 something. So it like really wasn't much. 825, yeah. So like, again, it's just the sentiment right now around PlayStation is starting to shift from like the Apple, like exclusive premium, super cool. They're starting to go to late stage Apple, where it's like nickel and diming. We're gonna take this out of the box, but tell you that it's actually for customer choice and flexibility, whatever BS they say. So I think, yeah, the separate stand was a dick move. Yeah, I think you're right. There's just no way to twist it where it's like the original one had the disk drive. The original one had the stand in the box. There's no way that stand, the new stand, cost them anywhere close to $30. They only separated it because they knew that a lot of people would want it vertical. In all the marketing, it's vertical. And so they said, hey, we're gonna make you buy that separately. It's again, late stage Apple, where they take out charging bricks, they take out the headphones, they take all this stuff out because they know you're gonna buy it anyways. Yeah, you're gonna like it.
For context, an extra 1TB in the form of an aftermarket SSD would run you around $100 if you want the same storage for a base PS5, which sweetens the deal when looking at the price difference between the PS5 and PS5 Pro. The big upgrade though is in the GPU, rated at 16.7 teraflops, which is a sizable jump on paper from the 10.3 teraflops of the original PS5. Sony says the Pro packs 67% more compute units and onboard memory that's 28% faster, resulting in up to 45% better performance. Without context, those numbers don't really mean much, but the details in my testing prove that they amount to a lot more than empty marketing promises. The important feature that these upgraded specs support,
like, come on, $30. Let me be clear at the, as we were getting into this. There's two things that can be true at the same time, okay? It could be that this is a solid device that greatly enhances your games and is like the definitive way to play console games. That could be true. And it can also be true that Sony, like, they're kind of being dicks with how they price stuff. Those two things can both be true at the same time. It can be a solid offering, and it can also be kind of slimy and scummy. In the same way that, like, if the 5090 is announced and it's like, yeah, you need to plug it into one of those outlets, like for your dryer, it needs to be 240 volt, whatever nonsense. And it's a $5,000 graphics card, and, it'll give you 15% better performance than the 4090. It could be that that's a really impressive piece of hardware, and it also is like kind of just not a good price to performance ratio. It's not a great offering and not a great product offering. Like, I get a migraine whenever I read these posts on like X of the people trying to play defense for PlayStation, because it's like, guys, it can be slimy and still be a good console, or it could be really fair like pro consumer offering, but also just not a great product. And so it's just not worth checking out, no matter how good the company is or how good they're treating people. Like, these are separate questions, but it feels like people are trying to sort everybody into a bucket where either you think it's too expensive, therefore you think it's a garbage machine and it's awful and it's terrible and it's stupid and it shouldn't exist. But that's not true. Like, it can be an awesome device and still they're nickel and diming you and being really slimy with how they sell it to you.
Specifically is PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution,
Pisser!
or PSSR. Much like NVIDIA's DLSS, this is Sony and AMD's AI-driven upscaling technology that uses machine learning to construct images that can appear with a quality close to full 4K resolution without having to stress the system's hardware to generate that detail through raw processing power. Granted, it won't be exactly the same as native 4K since it's scaling from a lower base resolution, but it doesn't have to, since you're not going to be putting it side by side with the real thing, and the vast majority of people aren't going to be able to tell the difference in most cases.
I do think this is important. The average gamer, I think they can tell the difference between 30 and 60, or fidelity and performance mode. I do not think the average gamer can tell the difference by the naked eye between 1440p and 4K. I don't think that that's accurate. I used to sell TVs to people. I used to sell home theaters to people, and I just don't see it. I don't see it. At one time, no, it's fine. I'll tell the story anyways. At one time, I went upstairs because my wife was playing a game on her gaming PC upstairs in the guest room, and I was like, something's weird about it. She had it running at like 800 by 400p. And this is like a modern-ish game. I think it was The Witcher or something. Like, it didn't look good at all. And I changed the resolution for her in the settings. It's like, that's so bad. Hold on. And I fixed it for her. She's like, oh yeah, I guess that's better. Wow, okay, thanks. But it didn't really bug her. She was just playing the game. It's whatever. And I do think that there's a lot of people who are not, that's an extreme example, obviously, but I think there's a lot of people who are not very much like resolution snobs. Frame rate snobs, sure, but the resolution snobbishness is a separate thing. I just, and honestly, a lot of the people aren't doing that stuff. I think that they're kind of, it's a bit cap when they're saying that they can see the differences and they know the differences. It's like, let me see if I can find that picture again when we were looking at the Bloodborne side by side. It's like this. I think most people, if you did the side by side, I don't think they'd be able to point out which is which. Maybe that's cynical of me. Maybe it's unreasonable of me. It's like, oh, it's a sharpness filter, kind of looks like, but that's about it. I just think like most people, when they're playing the game, they're not going to be able to really tell. So I think the resolution thing is much less of a selling point than the frame rate. I think that's a much bigger deal, in my opinion. But anyway, continuing on.
Especially while they're enjoying the higher frame rates and visual effects this technique allows. It's nice to see Sony is moving away from chasing raw computing power as the end-all be-all of console tech, and as upscaling continues to advance, so too will its implementation in games. As you'll see in our performance breakdown, PSSR is one of the major keys in creating parity between quality and performance options. It also opens the door for games to explore ray tracing techniques to a greater extent, although mileage will vary based on every game's PS5 Pro specific updates, where developers will choose to prioritize different aspects of their respective games. So the PS5 Pro is a bit more complex than simply having one uncompromised Pro enhanced mode. The PS5 Pro's tech gives developers room to be experimental in pushing boundaries, especially with ray tracing because it packs enough power to hit higher frame rates without sacrificing as much graphical fidelity. There's still some level of compromise to be made though, so if you were hoping that the Pro would take out all the FOMO stress out of selecting between 60 FPS performance or 30 FPS fidelity modes, well, in some games now there are even more modes to choose from. Alternatively, if you love having that control over how your games run, that's great news. In my experience though, the visual gap between these modes is much smaller than it is on a base PS5, often making the Pro's performance-centric modes the clear choice. Let's start with a marquee PlayStation first-party game, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. On PS5 Pro, you get to choose between Fidelity Pro and Performance Pro modes. The latter offers visual quality.
Again, it all just sounds so Apple to me. The Fidelity Pro Ultra mode or the Pro Motion Pro Fidelity Ultra Plus mode. Depending on which you choose, I don't know where I was going with that. But you know, like the freaking name schemes drive me crazy.
Quality that's identical to the base PS5's Fidelity mode, with all the original ray tracing features intact while maintaining a smooth 60 FPS. Effectively, the best of both worlds when compared to the PS5's modes. However, with the Fidelity Pro option, Insomniac cranked the knobs even further, putting features like ray-traced ambient occlusion, key light shadows, and further improved reflections on the table. But all those upgrades come at the cost again of being chained down to 30 FPS. You can tweak some of these settings to squeeze out a few extra frames, but I wasn't able to reach anything near 60 FPS even when turning everything down a notch. Horizon Forbidden West showcases another interesting implementation of PS5 Pro enhancements. It has 3 options: favor graphics, balance, and favor performance. Again, the performance-based mode is the way to go.
Like, it is definitely way sharper and it does look better. Like, I can tell the difference, but I'm also looking for the difference. If you're just playing the game, I'm not sure if it makes that big of a difference to you.
It hits a stable 60 FPS while in some respects looking even better than the base PS5's graphics priority mode. You get finer detail and foliage, better lighting, and a better resolution rendering technique. Especially for a game like Horizon, those extra frames make the gameplay experience so much better, and you can still enjoy the lush vistas with that added clarity. The PS5 Pro's graphics priority option, on the other hand, caps Horizon Forbidden West at 30 FPS, but pushes the boundaries with a higher base resolution. Yet, I don't find the trade-off worth it since it's tough to distinguish with the fantastic Pro Performance mode. The curious part is the balanced option, which goes for 40 FPS, and strikes a middle ground with visual quality, but honestly, it's not worth the 30% cut in frame rate for marginal visual gains. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered takes a different angle as well. It oddly retains the same exact 2 options available from the base PS5, graphics or performance priority. But there's a new Pro option that uses PSSR to take 1440p resolution to output 4K while retaining other visual qualities of the PS5's graphics mode and still hitting a consistent 60 FPS. It was already a visually impressive remaster on PS5, but the boost in performance while having all of its graphical details sing is nice. Of all the games that have gotten PS5 Pro updates ahead of launch, Alan Wake 2 is certainly the most interesting one. Remedy decided to go all in on ray tracing with its graphics mode, and it's absolutely stunning, with robust reflections and lighting giving its world a much more striking look, especially in the way that feeds into its atmosphere. The Pro enhancements stretch the limits of what PSSR is capable of, however. In graphics mode, it uses a base resolution of 1224p and runs at 30 FPS to make room for all those sweet
1224p, baby. Oh man, I mean, I really think most of this is just as simple as it seems. It's an incremental small upgrade. If you got $700 to burn, sure, more power to you. But if you're somebody that's like been saving up and you got $700 in your savings account or whatever, and you've been a good boy or girl and you're ready to go, and you're trying to decide if this is what you spend that money on, I really don't think this is what you should do it on. It's like, remember, the sequel to the Switch comes out next year. You know, they're going to have some big day one exclusives, I'm betting. And I think you get a lot more mileage for $700 out of that. But there are people who have plenty of money. who got plenty of money and are able to buy both. And for those people, you do you, whatever, you know, you earn the money, presumably, so spend it how you want. But I think if we're looking at it through the perspective and through the lens of somebody that's not just able to buy everything, if you're just looking at it from the perspective of what is the best application of $700, it's probably waiting for that Switch sequel and then spending the money there, because I think you're going to get a lot more out of that than like an incremental thing here. Now, if you have not bought a PS5, if you don't have one, if you maybe are just still rocking a PS4, honestly, if you're looking at PS5 versus PS5 Pro, I could see maybe stretching it and like saving up a little more to get this, because you'll future-proof yourself some more, I'm sure. And especially as we get later in the console generation, what happened last time was there were a lot of games that were being developed, like The Last of Us Part 2, which looked and ran kind of the way they were supposed to on the PS4 Pro. On the base PS4, they were rougher, you know, way lower resolution, just didn't look quite as good. So it'll future-proof you for the rest of the generation, I'm sure. But I think that's pretty much where it breaks down. If you have not bought a PS5 yet and you don't have one, it's probably the best place to start to future-proof yourself. If you already have a PS5, really hard to justify spending all this money on a new one, especially when there's new hardware coming out next year. And if you're also a PC gamer, the 50 series is expected to be revealed at CES early next year. So if you want to like try to future-proof your PC, not even future-proof, it's like bringing it up to the future once that comes out, because the 50 series stuff is probably going to be a bit insane. Like there's been rumors of what an expected like DLSS 4.0 can do. We haven't seen it in action, but if DLSS 4, if the rumors are true, like straight up in some games, it can just like triple. You can just like triple your performance. It's ridiculous. So we'll see. 5090 prioritizing native. The crazy thing, New World, is that DLSS, like 3.7 frame generation, all of that stuff is so good in a lot of games. You can turn it on and it will just double your frame rate, and you can't even really tell that it's on if you set it to quality mode. Like it's that good. It's ridiculous. It's as close to magic as you can get. There's some games where you can tell where maybe there's some latency involved and stuff like that, where you do want it to run natively. But a lot of these upscalers are getting so good, well, mainly DLSS, but DLSS is getting so good that there's a lot of cases where you can't even like tell. It's really impressive. So I wouldn't expect that the 5090 or 5080 like scrap or deprioritize rather the upscaling stuff. I think they continue to double down on it because it's just that good. But as they continue to train these models, these super sampling models, I think that they're only going to get better and better and better. And, you know, we've seen the discussions online of what they'll eventually be able to do, where you can take it and like you can kind of pair the engine, the game engine, with the graphics card. So you could feed the graphics card upscaling model information about like the texture used on the street, or about what's in the skybox, or other information about the scene that's being rendered. And then it could then go and upscale those individual puddles based on that. It could upscale the road with information specifically taken from the game that's informing the upscaler in that moment. There's other things that have been discussed where there's specific upscaling training done by individual games. So you could have a game that's trained DLSS on how to upscale it based on like native rendered footage, and then the upscaler learns how to make Alan Wake 2 look the best it possibly can, and then it upscales based on that depending on which game you're in. So there's so many little bitty things that they can do to continue to overhaul it. But you know, that's why I've kind of had to go. I initially was like, I don't know, the upscaler thing, it's such a crutch. And I do think it is, I do think it is a crutch for a lot of people, or for a lot of devs, where they feel like they don't need to optimize, maybe not the devs, but the publishers. They feel like they don't need to optimize the game because they can just pass it through an upscaler to hit a frame rate target. That was like the story of Jedi, Star Wars Jedi Survive. Is that what it was called? That doesn't sound right in my brain. It was Fallen Order. Is it just Jedi Survivor? That doesn't sound right, but I think that is right. Anyway, but like that game did not run anywhere near as well as it should have. And it was because they just relied on FSR2 to upscale it to make it run at a decent frame rate. And it should have been delayed like a lot, but they used that as a crutch to just put it out there, or EA did. I used to be very like annoyed by it, but the more I've seen the improvements they've made to like the path reconstruction for DLSS, I think that was in 3.4 or 3.5, and then the other stuff they've done with frame generation. Now I'm a firm believer, like these upscaling techniques and algorithms are insane. Pisser seems like it's a solid foundation, but it does seem like it could get better as time goes on. It's just going to take some time to get there. Right now it seems fine. Like the biggest compliment they can give to PSSR is that it's not as bad as FSR, which is not saying a whole lot because FSR is pretty bad. So eventually it could get to the point of being on the level of like DLSS, maybe 3, but by that point, NVIDIA is probably going to be in like DLSS 4 territory and just curb stomping everybody.
Ray tracing techniques. You won't get those big ray traced features in performance mode, but it will target 60 FPS with an image quality akin to the graphics mode on the base PS5. It has to use a fairly low base resolution of 864p to get there though. It's still a great looking game in this mode, although it's definitely a blurrier image. Regardless, I find Alan Wake 2 shows a noticeable improvement over what you get from the base PS5, even if there are still compromises to be made. Now, when there's a new powerful console, there's always
Rolex. I'm sorry guys, I feel like Monday, we talked about watches, like luxury watches, for the last 45 minutes of the stream. Once I go down one of those rabbit holes, it's really tough for me to stop, you know? But even now, I'm starting a rabbit hole while apologizing for another one. I'm out of control.
A racing game to flex the hardware. Taking speedy race cars down the track in F124 provides a pretty clear example of what ray tracing can do. When looking at the Pro Enhanced Quality mode and the base PS5's Quality mode, it's easy to pick up on the improvements in reflections and lighting, especially on rain-soaked tracks, and the Pro is able to do this by using PSSR to still target 60 FPS. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an example of where the PS5 Pro can bring a game out of the depths of weak technical performance to a much more playable state.
It's such a bummer how bad that game ran. Like, you just had to accept that it was going to be running between 40 and 25 for the entirety of its runtime. This was still this year. This feels like forever ago, but Dragon's Dogma 2 was this year, and I really, really liked it, like a lot. It really slowed down towards the end. I understand though why people don't like it. It's like I said in my review, it's super polarizing. It's something you will love and think is innovative and brilliant, or you're gonna hate it and think it's too slow and clunky and all that. It's really too bad. It's really too bad.
By using PSSR, the Pro is able to put out noticeably higher and more consistent frame rates than the base console can, whether you choose to prioritize performance or graphics, which enables ray tracing too. Though it's not without noticeable drops in busy areas. It's a powerful console, but it's not magic. On the other hand, something like Final Fantasy XVI is an example of how a game without Pro enhancements, or at least an uncapped frame rate option to just let the extra power work, isn't going to benefit in a tangible way without an update, since it's bound by the limitations that were built for its graphics modes. It's still capped at 30 FPS when prioritizing graphics, while the performance mode still targets 60 FPS with lesser visual quality. Now, that's a lot of technical information, but despite all those enhancements, the question still stands: is it actually worth buying a PS5 Pro? Frustratingly, the answer is always going to be, it depends on you. As someone who used to be a sucker for upgrading to new generations of high-end graphics cards to push my PC to its limits, the PS5 Pro scratches that old itch because I do notice and appreciate the differences it provides. The visual quality that the Pro Enhanced performance modes have thus far look fantastic, and it's all the more enticing because hitting 60 FPS gives a smooth gameplay experience that's tough to come back from. I've also found performance modes on the base PS5 to be lackluster in some cases, and since the Pro has shown the potential in addressing that shortcoming, I find that the new console can be a worthy investment. There are a few games out there now that make the Pro a more enticing prospect. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's performance mode on base PS5 feels too compromising to me, with in-engine cutscenes and close-ups on characters during pivotal moments looking muddled at 60 FPS. Thus, I bit the bullet and managed with 30 FPS gameplay so that I could get the visual experience that uplifted its storytelling qualities. It worked well enough for that sort of game, but I'd much rather have been playing at 60 FPS. With the Pro Enhancement patch, Rebirth has a new Versatility mode that merges both the high-quality graphics setting with 60 FPS performance into a singular mode, so there's no choice paralysis, and it delivers the exact type of experience I wanted.
Yeah, this is an example of one that's like night and day. If you're really, really into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you're probably justified in upgrading just for that. But elsewhere, I mean.
That said, I know and can fully understand people who don't care quite as much about having state-of-the-art systems to play their favorite games, so long as they meet a reasonable balance between performance and fidelity, which the original PS5 only rarely has a problem pulling off with existing games. And for a lot of people, playing at 30 FPS isn't necessarily a deal breaker, and if you're happy with that level of performance, you might as well be happier with a few $100s still in your bank account. And the Pro is a hard sell for anybody who expects a whole new experience when they unbox a brand new console. The PS5 Pro doesn't fundamentally transform how games are played, it just makes them look prettier and run smoother. And if you're happy with how your games look and play on a base PS5, then it's absolutely not worth paying a premium to upgrade.
Got that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's pretty basic. So basic, dare I say, that I can graph it in MS Paint like a true G. I think there's kind of a few different categories you can be into. So if you own a PS5, you're in one category, okay? If you don't know PS5, if you don't own one, you're in a different category. If you are like a maybe you're a PS4 is like a separate category, and then like PC gamer, considering whether it's worth jumping in here. PS5 gamer upgrading to the Pro, I think that this one, what is it? What's the Costco guys say? It's boom or what? Bust? No. What do they say? This is not boom. I think if you own a PS5, upgrading to the Pro is kind of tough to justify. It is not. It's doom. Okay, it's doom. Okay. I think it's doom, maybe. If you don't own a PS5, you don't own a PS4, maybe you've been rocking a Switch, or maybe you play through xCloud, whatever you do, or maybe you're wanting to get into gaming, then as a first time to get into it, I think that this one could make more sense to save up the extra money and go for it, because it is going to make a big difference. And this will come up over here too. We currently don't have a lot of exclusives to the PS5 yet that are like really console sellers. A lot of the stuff that has been exclusive has then gone to PC, and like there just haven't been a lot of things that are really cutting edge that justify it, unlike 2016 with the PS4 Pro at that time. So I think that you can hold off if you're waiting for those exclusives. But with the PS4, if you have a PS4, you don't have a PS5, and you've been waiting to upgrade, and you are in the PlayStation ecosystem this time, I mean, I think that makes sense. You don't have to buy it now, because again, there's not much reason to buy it right now. But if you're going to get in, similar to the people who don't have a PS5, I think if you're going to get in for the first time, yeah, go for the Pro, save up the extra money and do it that way. Now, if you have a PC and you are considering getting into the PlayStation ecosystem at some point, right now, there really is no reason to do it. The performance is going to be probably worse than you're used to. For $700, you could upgrade your GPU, assuming you sell your current one, and you could get a really solid 3080 or something like that. Or 4080 and rock and roll that way. The only reason you would do it is if there were exclusives you could not play on PC. Problem is for PlayStation is that pretty much everything they've had that is exclusive, they've just been bringing over to PC. So not much reason to leave the PC ecosystem so long as you're patient. The difference normally would be if they were launching stuff and it's exclusive for like a year, We're like Ghost of Yotei, exclusive to PlayStation 5 for a year. Okay, maybe then if you don't want to wait a year, spend $700, get the PS5 Pro, because it's going to be closest to what you're used to experiencing and play it that way. But we're not there yet. Maybe next year you can justify buying it, but it's not next year yet. I mean, the kind of elephant in the room with this also is GTA 6, frankly. That's kind of the big thing, where GTA 6 is coming next year. It is going to be exclusive to consoles. No PC port for probably 18 months is kind of what they're saying to expect. And in that case, I mean, it will be probably the best place to play GTA 6 for a year and a half until it comes to PC. And in that case, like, if you're buying a GTA 6 machine, it probably will be the best one, but it's not next year yet. And we don't know if this is getting delayed into 2026. We just don't know yet. But it's one of the strange things where it's like, guys, just because it may not make sense right this second, okay? You might just be buying something that's going to sit on your shelf. Like I've been thinking about, I'm like, okay, so I get a PS5 Pro. What do I do with it? I probably test it on one day, and then I'm going to go back to playing Metaphor on my ROG Ally. Like I'm not going to have anything to really push it or utilize it for. So it may not make sense to buy it right now. It could make sense next year with Ghost of Yotei, GTA 6, and those games. In which case, yeah, check it out. Go buy it. But as of right now, I just don't think it's a super solid offering. And especially as time goes by, you know, the disk drives might become more common and more readily available. There might also be other things that become more available, like maybe bundle deals where games are included or where the stand is included, and you'll make a much better, or you'll get a much better deal for it. So I think where I'm at right now is, for most people, just wait, just chill. You'll be fine. Very few people, I think, need this day one, but you know, maybe if you really, really want to play Horizon in like cutting edge fidelity, maybe then it makes sense. But as right now, I think it just doesn't make the most sense at this point. You know, it's the same thing with like the brand new iPhone. I tried to get the new iPhone, the 16 whatever thing, and I ended up returning it because like the whole selling point was all this AI stuff, and the AI stuff is not even included day one. Like it comes months later, or they're like sometime this winter or this fall. Okay, so maybe this fall it makes sense. Maybe this fall it makes sense to buy that new iPhone. Right now it doesn't, because none of that stuff is realized. You can actually use it and put it to its max use. So I think there's a nuance to the discussion, but I think that for most people, chill. You'll be okay. Wait for a bundle, wait till there's a game that justifies it. Because if you can't tell me right now that you're going to play like 1 or 2 games on it that will look significantly better, you probably don't need it. If you're saying, hey, I've been waiting to play whatever, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and what was it, Alan Wake 2. I've been waiting to play those on console for this. Okay, you can probably justify it. I think you could justify it. But if you don't have something loaded up like that, I don't think it makes sense. He took my thing.